This is Cinderella, Part 2. A trumpet sounded as the golden carriage drew up at the palace gates. Cinderella received a royal welcome. Lords bowed low, ladies curtsied, and many heads turned as she entered the ballroom, including that of the prince, who was immediately struck by Cinderella's elegance and the warmth of her smile. The prince approached. "Milady," he said, bowing his head slowly and offering his hand, "would you be so kind as to take my first dance?" "I would be delighted," said Cinderella. She could feel her cheeks beginning to blush as she accompanied the prince to the dance floor. The orchestra began to play. Every eye in the ballroom was upon them, including those of her stepsisters. But such was Cinderella's transformation, they simply didn't recognize her. Instead, they stared in envy, longing to take her place before the prince. But they never did. From that moment forth, the prince had only eyes for Cinderella. The two of them spent the whole evening dancing in each other's arms and greatly enjoying each other's company. Many hours drifted by. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Suddenly, Cinderella looked up at the clock. It was 11:55 p.m., and she had only 5 minutes before the magic spell was broken. "I must go," she said to the prince. Without delay, she darted out of the room, past the guards and through the palace. But as she reached the hall, she lost one of her glass slippers, and in her haste to get away, she left it. Alas, the clock struck midnight. Cinderella found no coach outside the palace, only a pumpkin. Even the rat, mice, and grasshoppers were nowhere to be seen. And now, clad in her original rags, Cinderella had no choice but to run home, alone in the darkness of the night. A few days passed. Cinderella returned to her daily chores, and her stepsisters continued their relentless beastliness towards her. Everything was back to normal. The evening of the royal ball began to blur and fade in Cinderella's mind like a magic dream. Had the pumpkin really turned into a golden carriage, and the rat into a coachman? Had she really danced all night with the prince, as her stepsisters watched on in envy? She was beginning to doubt it. Suddenly came a rap upon the door. Cinderella opened it. In front of her stood the same rotund little man that had announced the royal ball, the same 2 knights behind him as before. "I present," he said triumphantly, "His Majesty, the Prince." A trumpet sounded, and the armored knights parted to reveal the prince, holding a sparkling glass slipper, the very same slipper that had escaped Cinderella's foot as she fled the palace a few nights earlier. Cinderella's eyes widened. It really happened, she thought to herself. She locked eyes with the prince and held his gaze for a moment. Not for long, but enough time for him to know the lady with whom he had danced that magical night was standing before him. All of a sudden came the heavy stomping of feet, and the stepsisters came rushing to the door, barging Cinderella aside so hard she nearly lost her footing. The little man continued. His Majesty is visiting every home in the land to find the rightful owner of this glass slipper. The foot that fits the shoe belongs to the lady that he will ask to marry. The sisters yelped with excitement. Now, at this point, the prince already knew that the sisters' feet would not fit the shoe, but he had not the heart to tell them. So, for the following 10 minutes, a quiet, ridiculous charade took place as the sisters, in return, tried on the slipper. The first sister's foot was so wide that it barely made it halfway in, and to avoid the slipper shattering under the pressure being exerted upon it, the little man was forced to intervene. The second sister had more luck. She eventually managed to compress her foot into the slipper, only for the sides of her foot to spill over the edges like a river bursting its banks. Then came the turn of Cinderella. The sisters coughed in unison at the mere thought of Cinderella in her threadbare rags, trying on such an elegant shoe. She wasn't even at the ball, one said under her breath. The prince stepped forward with a knowing look in his eye, knelt down, and carefully slid the glass slipper on Cinderella's foot. The prince smiled. "A perfect fit," he said. Without a moment's hesitation, Cinderella reached into the pocket of a ragged servant's dress. Then, bending forward slowly, she placed the matching slipper upon her other foot. "A matching pair!" exclaimed the prince with delight. "There is no doubt that you, Cinderella, are my one true love. I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Would you do me the grand honor of becoming my wife?" Cinderella looked upon her rags and then back to the prince. "I am but a poor servant," said Cinderella. "You are," replied the prince, "a princess in my eyes, and it matters not to me of the clothes upon your back, for we share something more valuable than the gold of 1,000 kingdoms." He looked longingly into Cinderella's eyes and said, "We share love." I am pleased to say that Cinderella gladly accepted the prince's proposal, and shortly after, they were married. Before long, they ruled as king and queen and dedicated their lives to the happiness and prosperity of the people in their wonderful kingdom. The end.